just gonna do some real-time sharpening. I mean, if anyone's got any questions or anything like that about sharpening, you know, you get asked billions of questions about sharpening to the point where you just don't even want to talk about it anymore. You just figure it out, do it. But you know, no one's born knowing how to do any of this stuff, so just kind of go through some of the basics here. So, idea with sharpening, we basically want to stick with one side, right hand, left hand, just stick to one side. Stick with that side, and you want to work up that side until you have a burr, okay? So if you sharpen one side long enough, you'll get a little lip of metal you could feel if you just lightly touch and feel, like this right here. And then that'll let you know that you've completed that side that you're working on, and then you would jump over to the opposite side. I switch hands. Some people will sharpen, you know, same hand, but they'll switch the side of the knife. I just switch sides because it's faster for me to hold the knife at a 45-degree angle of orientation. When I hold it like this right here, man, you get a lot of wobble and stuff like that. So I would just prefer to switch the hand. But made the burr on the one side. We sharpen this side until we get a lip of metal we could feel here. That lets us know we're done grinding. We have an edge underneath that burr that we could feel if we got a burr on both sides. So you have to sharpen to a burr. The idea is you're not making your burr out to here. You have to make it big enough to feel though. And you just come at it and you lightly feel if you have a little lip of metal. It lets you know you're done. From there, you just do as light touch as possible to take the burr off. Okay? Now you can go heel to tip. You can go tip to heel. Doesn't matter. I just go tip to heel. That's my idiosyncrasy when I sharpen. That's what I like to do. If I'm teaching somebody, I'll teach them to do exactly what I do. Other people, plenty of ways to skin a cat, man. We're not even going to get into that. But you essentially, you don't count. You don't go, okay, 8, 7, 6, 5. You don't do any of that shit because all you need to do is just get the burr off. And you get the burr off, it's a lot like working a paper clip. So you work that paper clip and you can bust it off. And that's essentially what you're doing to get rid of that burr. You're just doing the lightest touch possible. That's one reason why harder steels actually sharpen better than those fucking doo-doo soft like steels that people say, oh, I want extreme durability, all this stuff. Well, you got this microstructure that when you sharpen and grind it, it's easy. But then when it comes to getting the burr off, oh man, it doesn't really want to come off, you know. So that's one reason why the harder steel is superior when it comes to sharpening. So once you strip that burr off, and how you do it, like I said, is the lightest touch possible, okay? And you get that guy off at the same angle. You have to hit the same angles to get that guy off without increasing the angle, without using heavy force and all that good stuff. And that's how you clean that off. And when you clean that burr off, you should have an apex. There'll still be a little residual amount of burr off the stone. And that's why some people, they'll like to go up to finer and finer grits is so that they can try to get that burr reduced even more and more. The idea is that you then jump over to a strop. And so we're just going to jump into it. That's basically how you sharpen. That's all you need to know for the most part. Everything else is just practice, really. So you don't need the water running or anything like that. Finding your angle, you know, I mean, that takes a lot of, I guess, experience. You know, you don't want to hold up to about here. You don't want to hold 90. You don't want to hit it flat on there, do you? So basically, rule of thumb is, you know, if you have that at 90, half of that's 45, half of that's about 22, and then half of that is about where you want to hold it. You're just going to have to get the experience holding it, okay? And the idea is that you need to hold whatever you hold consistently. You don't want to do anything like that. Naturally, with freehand sharpening, you're going to put a little bit of a convex at your bevel right here. We're not sharpening this whole side of the fucking knife. We're just sharpening right here at the bevel. And the bevel's small because the grind is thin. That's why that's so small, the bevel. If this was a thicker grind, the same angle we would hold, a low angle, would be sharpening the goddamn side of the knife. So that's why it's important for thin grinds and stuff like that. It makes it much easier to sharpen. So we've had our angle, okay, say about here. Now how we sharpen is we move the knife back and forth. Some people will be like, oh, I just always make sure I make cuts like this into the stone, or oh, I always go away when I go, and oh, what do you do when you're going back and forth? You're not supposed to go back and forth. Well, the idea, like we talked about in the beginning, was that we're just grinding one side until we got that burr, lip of metal. Okay, grinding that one side till we get that burr, lip of metal. It doesn't matter if we go like this or like this, but you bet your sweet ass it would speed it up if we just go back and forth. Okay, so instead of sharpening this whole knife like that, the reason why we don't sharpen like this is because as I'm out here, the force is back here. What these fingers do is they help focus the pressure on the stone. Okay, so anywhere I sharpen is going to be where my fingers are. I don't sharpen where my fingers aren't. So I don't sharpen like this. I sharpen right here. If I sharpen like this, I'm exaggerating, but this is what's going on. So you don't want to do that. You focus the pressure here. Your angle control is here. When you get to the tip on something, you lift the handle. All you're doing is you're just lifting the handle. So it makes no difference if we have this knife with this belly and we lift the handle to get there. I'm just lifting the handle. If I lay it on the side here, I lift the handle to touch. It's the same angle. What I see is I see a lot of goofball shit from people where they got a big ass knife like this with the curve, and they're all trying to this. You can't see how I have the camera set up, but my elbow is in an awkward position trying to sharpen like that. So just keep everything nice and tight. 45 orientation to the stone, and then when you get towards the tip, in order to sharpen the tip, you lift the handle. So I lift the handle to get to the tip. I focus where I'm sharpening with my fingers. So essentially, when you're sharpening, the knife never leaves the stone, and your fingers never leave the knife. So it's a real smooth, fluid motion. If I'm setting the knife up and down like that, I'm introducing more variation to the angle. If I'm always picking up and moving my fingers, it slows me down. That's really slow. See how slow that is? I have to stop and move them. So you flow your fingers on there. If your fingers are sticking, or if you're not comfortable walking them, there's water on the blade here. Now, you don't have to have the faucet running. I'm just doing that. But if you got some water on there, you can just slide it. So vitrified CBN stone. I'm just kind of showing these off, but man, I got to teach people how to do some sharpening because sharpening is so anemic. Not many people know how to do the freehand knife sharpening, which I feel like this is the most important, most underappreciated skill on the planet. I'm making all these super steel knives and all that stuff. I don't make that stuff for people to get out of sharpening. I make that stuff so that people can take the time and the effort they put into their knife that they sharpen, and it'll actually hold the beautiful edge that they put into it, and they can sharpen when they want to, not because they have to fucking stop and have to, because the knife won't hold a goddamn edge, So yeah, the sharpening is really, really important. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, people are making very wild conclusions about steel, heat treatment, all this stuff. And realistically, it comes down to how the knife was sharpened, and if it was sharpened properly, if it has a proper angle, if it has the proper edge finish for that job, if you've removed all the fatigue steel using the proper abrasives. It's really important, but it's not very well understood. There's just a lot of different opinions about it. There's a lot of noise about it, but just the people that know how to do this stuff need to speak up more and get that information out to the people that are really curious and want to know. So essentially where we left off there before we went on our little rant was the fingers never leave the knife never leaves the stone, so that we have a fluid motion as we're going about it, okay? So in order to sharpen a big-ass knife like this right here, we don't try to do this all in one pass, okay? what we try to do is we break it down into sections. So we'll have a section here. We'll move the blade in this path. Most of the sharpening comes from the motion, not from bearing down on it with your goddamn gorilla strength. That's not how the sharpening works. Really what you want to do is the motion is what sharpens. So if I'm just sharpening in a little area right here, this is not as efficient as moving like this across a stone. So if the motion does the sharpening, we have abrasives sticking up at a microscopic level like little spikies, and when we move the blade across them, they're catching, cutting material. Then that means that yes, we want to sharpen like this. We don't want to sharpen little scrubbies like that, unless we're looking for a certain effect. You know, some knife finishers, if they're looking for a certain kind of finish, they'll do little scrubs and things like that. We're talking about sharpening though, we're not talking about finishing. And so we want to use a good length of the stone. We usually want to stick to the middle of the stone, etc. So we break it down into sections. We have a section here. We just go for a little bit. Don't even count, okay? I mean, if you need the count because you're learning, you know, just 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Towards the tip, lift the handle, 1, 2, 3, okay? But realistically, I'm not fucking counting. I'm not doing any of that stuff. You know, if that's a training aid for you, that's fine. But when you're sharpening, it should look like this. Just fluid. So we continue doing that until we get that burr. We definitely have a burr on here. This is SRS 15 at 64 RC. It has like 1.5% vanadium, 1.5% tungsten. You know, it's a hyper-eutectoid steel. It has a decent amount of carbon, but nothing crazy. And then, 13% chromium. So good carbon-chromium balance allows it to get very hard. But we're not really having a lot of vanadium carbide inside the steel. It's mostly going to be chromium carbide. Even though it has tungsten and vanadium, most of that tungsten and vanadium is going to be going in towards the chromium carbide. So jump over here. Once we get that burr on that side, and the burr is kind of a tricky thing to feel. If you're feeling for a burr, you need to dry the blade off. Okay, and you're trying to make the smallest burr possible. Now, when you're learning, it's difficult to feel for a burr, so you're going to make bigger burrs. But if you're a really good sharpener, you're trying to make the smallest burr possible, because what's happening is as you sharpen your knife reduces in size like this. You're sharpening your knife away. Okay, so when you're feeling for a burr, you want to come in and lightly touch like this. I see some people, they'll drag across like that. It's a wiry piece of metal sticking straight up. You could still cut yourself on the burr. So don't do that shit. Come in perpendicular. When I'm feeling for the burr, I'm just taking the pad and I'm touching. Don't mush it over like that. You can't feel fucking burr if you do that. Come in like this, just a light touch. And then you could feel the burr. Pretty straightforward. You want to make sure you have a burr of your tippy tip to your heel all the way through. You don't just want to be like, got a burr, I'm done, up, 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 up. Usually it's tricky to get your burrs here and your burrs here, because since you have to lift the handle to get to the tip here, and then also some people, they neglect getting the heel area back here. For the most part, most people sharpen away their knives here, and if you're not making sure you're getting a burr here and here, you get a recurve in the blade, look really ugly, and everyone's going to know you're a noob when they look at that knife. So you don't want to do that shit. So make sure you have a burr all the way through, light touch, feather the pad, don't mash, don't go perpendicular, etc. So jump over to the left hand side. Some people, they'll just sharpen right hand side. The reason why I don't like that is when I'm holding the knife like this, I have fucking no control over the angle. It's really easy for it to wobble. You can build that skill for sure. But I just felt I was getting more consistent superior edges by just switching to the left hand side. And it's difficult, but if you're learning anyways, you might as well just learn this way. It's like learning a new language or whatnot. Like if you learn when you're young, if you learn when you're getting started, it's not so bad. If you have to relearn and you've been sharpening for like 5 years or something like that, that can be kind of difficult. But That's what I did, and I just highly recommend it. It just gets your edges much, much better just switching hands. So switch hands, find your angle. Same thing that we did on that side there. Sharpen in sections. And the burr usually comes up easier on this side, just because we're not having to cut through as much material. So yeah, we've already got the burr. This is an easy sharpening steel, and this is a crazy aggressive stone, so it's not too big of a deal. But that's the bevel that we're making right there. And so we feel for the burr. And I'm feeling right here. And we want to let's get the burr more pronounced at the very tip here. This is realistic. This is real life. You know, you don't just like do this and it just magically happens perfectly. You're stopping and you're assessing and you're checking stuff out. Let's clear the stone here. So yeah, this knife is 64 RC. It's sharpening like butter. This is 1,000 grit stone. But we expect that. You know, it's only 64. That's harder than most people's knives. Probably about 10 points harder than any of the cheapo knives people have. But it's not, I wouldn't say that this steel particularly needs a CB water stone. It's mostly chromium carbide. It's a lot like crewware. It's like a more stainless crewware. It's cool stuff. SRS 15 steel. Yeah, got that burr. So now that we got the burr, both sides, remember we started on this side right here. The burr always happens on the opposite side. We get the burr consistent all the way through. We then switch to the other side. The burr comes up on the opposite side, okay, that we could feel. We make sure it's consistent all the way through. We're done. But we're not, are we? Because our edge is underneath this burr, we now have to do the difficult task of getting rid of that burr. And I say difficult, I mean, it is, I would say, yeah, it could be difficult because you do all the hard work to grind your bevels and make them nice and even. And if you hit this with wrong angles, then you can take off all your effort. Okay, so the deburring is actually, it's kind of tricky. It's the last step, and it's different from the sharpening. What we're trying to do with deburring, so we've got the burr on this side here, is we want to do, now in my experience, edge trailing works better for me because we're working with a water stone. If we were working with something differently, maybe we would do edge leading. For my CBN water stone, don't do edge leading. Please do edge trailing for the best results with this stone. Now we come in here and we just want to do a light touch. If we went any lighter, it would skitter on the stone. That's how light of a touch we're using here. Okay, so light touch, light touch. If you have a really heavy burr, and we have little bits of the burr come off, depending on the steel, sometimes you can get long strips, which are really fun, but most steels it comes off in little bits unless you have something that's like a really shit steel, then it kind of doesn't want to come off. Shit steel, shit heat treat and whatnot. You just have to deal with it. But sometimes if the burr is strong enough, I do what's called a soft pass, where I'll just kind of, with the lightest touch possible, I'll just kind of go forward, backward, just a few times, just to make sure I'm holding that consistent angle, because every time you do a switch, maybe you can introduce a few variables to the angle. But I do that if I have what I feel like is a heavy burr. You know, if I have a heavy burr, then I'll just do some soft passes, on this side. Light touch though, and I'm just trying to do the same angle. I'm just following the curvature of the knife. Light touch. And I just go tip to heel. And so there's no counting involved, but you just alternate sides and you stop and you try to feel the edge. And what you're trying to feel, disclaimer, you know, just don't be a dipshit here. But what you're trying to feel is with the lightest touch possible. If you look at a sharpener's hands, you'll see these little kind of cuts on his fingers. That's how you know somebody is a knife sharpener. These little cuts, because what they're doing, they're just feeling for if the edge bites them dead on when they slightly slide their fingers. And you're getting a lot of information from your fingertips, but you just have to train them, your fingertips, to your brain basically to understand what your fingertips are telling you. And what you want to know is that biting you dead on? You know, does it feel granular like sand? No, because what happens is the burr, it's not a happy story as far as, oh, we make a burr and we make a burr on the other side, and then we just do the trailing and it comes off and it's done. Usually you have a little bit of burr sticking up right there at the end. So you try to minimize that as much as possible because you'll break the burr off, but then there's the base of that burr that you've broken off there. Do I change directions? Like we talked about, this is a live feed, so people are jumping in all these different places. Is when you're sharpening back and forth, speed it up, you're just trying to make a burr. Repeat that on the opposite side. So then you have a burr on the other side. You can't have a burr on both sides, okay? It's either one or the other. We're just using that to let us know that we've crossed over the plane. So it's something that helps us speed up. And from here, we just do the edge trailing. We don't do edge leading for this particular water stone. You have a ceramic rod, you have some other tool or method, do whatever the hell you want. But I'm telling you right now, you buy this stone from me, don't do edge leading, do edge trailing. And we're just doing that for helping get rid of the burr. You slide, but I mean, it doesn't, you can do either way, whatever allows you to feel what the edge is doing. You know, I'm not going to tell you that you need to go, oh, Sean says you only need to go this way, and if you go in that way, you're a fucking idiot. Like, just whatever way allows you to feel the edge. You're going to have to just get practice with it. There's nothing I can tell you in a video that will tell you if your knife is sharp doing this method. I mean, you're just going to have to get the feel for it, and you're only going to get the feel for it if you do it a lot. And so, yeah, what could I say? I mean, if you don't feel comfortable doing that finger technique, don't do it. You know, you have to use common sense, stay within your limit. So I'm not telling anybody that that's the test that people need to do to figure out if their knife is sharp. You know, we're all kind of held back by the lowest common denominator. There's always that one guy out there that's going to cut himself, or just do whatever you feel safe doing, bro. But yeah, I don't make any distinction between going forward or backward. Just what you're looking for is if it cuts you dead on. Our scratches will be at a 45-degree orientation. So when you're feeling back this way, it's more aggressive. If you sharpen like this, on each side, it could be different. Would I do leading edge on a DMT? Fuck no. But, you know, that's the best part about sharpening is, especially with freehand, it's based off of a lot of feel, and it's based off of results. You know, the results I get with my technique, maybe that's just idiosyncrasies and things that work best for me. I'm not saying that in this video that, oh, this is the only way to sharpen. You know, you sharpen best standing on your fucking head and juggling, go for it. Leading passes on DMT? Fuck no, I wouldn't do that. But hey, you know, if you're getting better results, question why? Why am I getting better results with the edge leading versus edge trailing? You know, what are you doing? You do, grins. Nah, fuck all that. I don't do that. I mean, we don't even see any DMTs here, do we? I don't use DMTs. I'm not a big fan. So now we check the edge. I mean, realistically, when you're deburring on the stone, I mean, unless you're introducing some kind of micro bevel, which if you're going to do a micro bevel, let's get this out of the water here. If you're going to do a micro bevel, my edge angle is here. I don't micro bevel that high. Okay, if my edge angle is here, I move it about there. And if you notice, the camera can't really tell, because that's how you're supposed to do a real micro bevel, is you're just trying to cut off the base of that burr if you're going to use a micro bevel. So that's that. But what I'm getting at there is that it's difficult to get rid of 100% of the burr. It's not like we can really see. It's not the burr if it's on either side. It's the base of the burr sticking straight up. So we'll check the edge here. This is a 1,000 grit edge, and this is a CB and water stone, so it's very aggressive. This is going to be more aggressive than other 1,000 grit stones, but the idea was that is that I felt like with high carbide steels anyways, the edge finish you wanted was something on the toothier side to expose more of those carbides. So it's kind of the antithesis of sharpening high carbide steel to try to smooth out all the carbides per se. But we'll just go ahead and check here. So we have here. And so we can cut supported paper towel because I'm supporting it there. I'm not free hanging paper towel. But it looks like we have a little bit of hesitation there at the tip. And so we can go back and try to clean that up more on the stone. But we have kind of a little bit of more of a cheater method we can use. And what we can use is we can use a strop. And so you have a piece of leather and you put diamond spray on that. Some people are about emulsions and what about polydiamond and CBN and blah, 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 and all this stuff. The reason why you use the spray is because it keeps your leather from getting super stiff. The emulsions and all that stuff, suspensions, they make the leather crazy stiff. Now, there could be some advantages to a really stiff leather if you're using maybe stropping for honing. I don't use stropping for honing because it doesn't replace sharpening regardless. What I use stropping for is for finishing my edge if I wanted to bring it up less tooth, a little more precise, a little more finesse and stuff like that. And so stropping on leather is the same as stropping on the stone. And we'll move that out of the way and show you. But there's all kinds of different sized diamond strops and all that stuff, different compounds. You just load up the leather by spraying it on the leather. I just use 1 micron. I've used 10 micron, 5 micron. I've used all the fine stuff, you know, 1/4 micron, 1/2 micron, 1/10 of a micron, 1/2 a 10th of a micron. My assessment about all that stuff, you know, and then the emulsions and CBN and all that stuff is just 1 micron diamond spray. Just simplify your life. Like, don't waste your time with anything else. That's all you need. You know, your mileage may vary. There's definitely a lot of different opinions about that. If you want my opinion about it, 1 micron diamond. That's my preference. And so it's important that you do edge trailing on the leather. There was some question about if you should do edge leading or edge trailing on a stone. The leather makes that decision for you, because if you go forward on the leather, you're going to cut the leather. You know, it seems pretty fucking obvious, but you know, nothing's very obvious. No one's born knowing all this stuff. You know, I understand. So edge, trailing, strokes, and just a light touch, because we're just trying to refine the teeth that we have on there. If you feel any kind of burr come off or crunch, then just make sure you wipe that off. Don't get water on the strop. It'll cause, got a little water right here, cause the leather to bubble up. It doesn't matter if you get it on the bottom. It's no big deal. You don't want to get it on the top here. It'll cause the leather to bubble up. If that happens, I mean, you're just going to have to, if it's really bad, you're just going to have to sand the leather down, reapply. The black on my leather strop, that's metal. That's metal shavings coming off here. So. And I just go about like 8 passes. You can go up to 20 passes. I mean, boom. Yeah, I mean, it's like you can do a lot of different stuff, you know, and there's definitely a lot of like sharpening geekoid stuff where it's like you're doing it just because you can. You're going to 5 million grit because you can. You're trying to get hair whittling from the lowest grit because you can. That's for another video though, as far as different edge finishes do different things, man. And it does get kind of annoying sometimes when some people are using the wrong edge finish for the application and then they're blaming it on steel or heat treat or this and that or the other, you know, so that could be kind of fucking annoying when you're like, dude, why are you using that edge finish then? that's a different story. That's for a different video. So what I would just want to show is we'll see what happens here. But after you strop, what you do is you don't really, now the bevel is brighter, but you don't really, this is the bevel up here, you don't really polish out the bevel completely. It's not like 1 micron roughly translates to 16,000 to 20,000 grit, depending on what grit scale you use. It's not like you polish out the bevel perfectly. Okay, it still has the 1,000 grit scratch in there. You know, 1,000 grit can range anywhere from, depending on the grit scale, like 20 to 10 micron. Okay, so there's no way you're finishing out that deep of a scratch just jumping over to leather with 1 micron. But the idea, the beauty of stropping with compound is whatever you set the edge to on whatever stone, when you strop it, you polish those teeth that you have there. So you don't completely polish everything out to 16,000 grit. You don't really want to do that. You want to have some teeth. And steels like this, they get hard, that's nice, the matrix does, but they're filled with really hard particles called carbides. And you want those at the teeth exposed, nice and polished, and they give you the best of both worlds. So that's why stropping is fun. You can't take a dull ass knife and strop it back to this level of sharpness. And it's basically how you use the stropping is after you get done sharpening, you want a little more boom boom, you go and you strop. Okay, but it takes a sharp edge and makes it sharper. That's how stropping works. So there's some confusion about stropping, but that's my opinion about that from my experience. So we're gonna cut the paper towel, and it's just a much cleaner slice than we had originally earlier in the live feed. Look at that. We're getting a little hesitation there towards the tip. Looks like we need to strop a little bit more at the tippy tip here, but the rest looks like we're slamming. Let's try the tippy tip here again. That'll do.